I stared at the empty spot where my car should have been, the pit of my stomach dropping as reality set in. After 13 hours in the ER, this was the cherry on top of the worst day imaginable. My Honda Civic, old but reliable, had vanished from the visitor parking spot I'd used hundreds of times before. No warning, no notice, just gone. And I knew exactly who was responsible. "Looking for something, Mr. Harding?" The voice behind me dripped with artificial sweetness. I didn't need to turn around to know it was Abigail Kramer, our HOA president and the neighborhood's self-appointed dictator. At 47, she ran Sycamore Heights with an iron fist wrapped in designer clothing. "Where's my car, Mrs. Kramer?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the exhaustion pulling at every muscle in my body. "That's what happens when you park in a visitor spot overnight, Owen." She adjusted her pearl necklace, a smug smile playing across her lips. "Rules are rules. It's been towed to Johnson's impound lot. The retrieval fee is $350, plus a $75 HOA violation." I took a deep breath. "I'm an ER doctor. I was called in for an emergency surgery last night that ran long. My regular spot was blocked by the landscaping crew when I got home." "Not my problem," she said, checking her manicured nails. "Perhaps next time you'll plan better. Everyone follows the same rules at Sycamore Heights." Little did she know, I wasn't just Owen Harding, the quiet homeowner who kept to himself in Unit 14B. And she was about to learn that towing my car would be the beginning of her downfall. I moved to Sycamore Heights 3 years ago after leaving active military service. After 12 years as a combat surgeon, I wanted a quiet place to decompress while I transitioned to civilian hospital work. The neighborhood had seemed perfect, well-maintained, peaceful, and close to the hospital. What the real estate agent had conveniently omitted was that Sycamore Heights was under the iron rule of Abigail Kramer. Within my first week, I received 2 violation notices, one for putting my trash can out 6 hours early, and another for having blinds that were off-white, rather than pearl-white, as dictated by the HOA handbook. Each came with a $50 fine. I paid the fines and replaced the blinds. I wasn't looking for trouble, just peace. Over the next 3 years, I watched as Abigail's reign intensified. Monthly HOA fees mysteriously increased from $250 to $400. Special assessments appeared for projects that never materialized. Anyone who questioned these changes found themselves buried in violation notices or facing aggressive legal letters from the HOA's attorney. My neighbor Maria, a 70-year-old widow, was fined $500 for planting roses instead of the approved begonias. When she couldn't pay, a lien was placed on her home. She moved out 3 months later, her retirement savings depleted by legal fees. I kept my head down. Between my shifts at County General and volunteering at the Veterans Clinic, I barely had time to notice the increasingly oppressive atmosphere. But I did notice when the security cameras went up, not at entrances for safety, but pointed at residents' doors and patios. "We need to maintain standards," Abigail would say at every monthly meeting. "Property values depend on strict adherence to the rules." But now she had crossed a line. Towing my car after a night spent saving a teenager who'd been in a horrific car accident wasn't just inconvenient, it was cruel. I trudged to the impound lot, paid the exorbitant fee, and retrieved my car. Inside, I found another envelope tucked under the windshield wiper, a second violation notice for creating a disturbance when I'd asked about my car. Another $100 fine. That was the moment I decided Abigail Kramer needed to be stopped. The next morning, I walked to the community mailbox and found yet another violation notice, this one claiming my garden hose had been visible from the street. As I stood there, my neighbor Amelia Gordon approached, looking nervous. "Another one?" she asked, glancing at the envelope in my hand. "Third this week," I confirmed. Amelia lowered her voice. "Listen, Owen, there's something you should know. I work at City Hall in the records department and—" She glanced around, making sure no one was listening. "I think there's something fishy going on with the HOA finances. Large withdrawals to companies that don't exist." "How do you know they don't exist?" Because I checked the business registrations. These companies aren't real, but they're getting thousands of dollars from our HOA account. Before she could say more, a silver Mercedes pulled into the parking lot. Abigail. Amelia quickly said goodbye and hurried away. That conversation planted the seed of an investigation. For the next week, I documented every HOA rule, every violation notice, and every fee increase over the past 3 years. I created a spreadsheet of reported violations and fines compared to the actual HOA regulations. The discrepancies were startling. Fines were often double what the handbook allowed, and many violations weren't even in the rules. But I needed more concrete evidence of financial misconduct. That's when I remembered something from my military days. During my final deployment, I hadn't just served as a surgeon. I'd been part of a specialized financial crimes task force investigating corruption in military contracts. I had contacts who could help. I called my old colleague, Alex Winters, now working for the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. "I need a favor," I said after explaining the situation. "You think your HOA president is embezzling funds?" Alex sounded skeptical. "I know it sounds small compared to what we used to handle, but she's destroying lives here. People are losing their homes over fabricated violations. What do you need?" "Just some guidance on how to legally obtain financial records. I want to do this by the book." Alex sighed. "I'll email you some resources. But Owen, be careful. People get weird when their financial schemes are threatened." I didn't know how right he was. The next day, I requested copies of the HOA's financial statements, as was my right as a homeowner. The HOA secretary, Patty Miller, Abigail's loyal lieutenant, informed me that such documents required a processing fee of $250 and would take 30 business days. "That's not in the bylaws," I pointed out. "New policy," she replied with a tight smile. "Approved at the last board meeting." "The meeting that was rescheduled without notice?" I asked. Her smile faltered. "The notification was sent. I'd like the minutes from that meeting as well. Those aren't available yet. They're required to be made available within 72 hours. It's been 2 weeks. Patty's eyes narrowed. "You're becoming quite the troublemaker, Dr. Harding. Abigail mentioned you might be difficult." I smiled politely. Just a concerned homeowner exercising my rights. That evening, I returned home to find my front door unlocked. Nothing seemed disturbed at first glance, but my gut told me someone had been there. The feeling was confirmed when I found my laptop open on my desk. I always shut it down when leaving. I checked my security system, a habit from my military days. The hidden camera I'd installed after the first break-in at Sycamore Heights, which Abigail had dismissed as probably just kids, had captured everything. The footage showed Patty and a maintenance worker entering my unit with a key. They searched through my papers, photographed documents on my desk, and checked my laptop. This wasn't just HOA overreach anymore. This was breaking and entering. I called Alex again. "They entered your home without permission? That changes things," he said. "Document everything, but don't let them know you have evidence yet. I'm going to make some calls." The next day, I attended the monthly HOA meeting, recording device discreetly in my pocket. Abigail presided like a queen, dismissing concerns about the swimming pool that had been under renovation for 8 months, and announcing yet another special assessment for security upgrades. When the floor opened for questions, I raised my hand. "Yes, Dr. Harding?" Abigail's tone suggested she was doing me a great favor by acknowledging my existence. "I'd like to discuss the financial statements I requested." Her smile tightened. "That's being processed. I'd also like to address the unauthorized entry into my unit yesterday." A murmur went through the room. Abigail's face remained impassive, but a slight flush crept up her neck. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "Now, moving on to landscaping concerns, I have video footage," I continued calmly, "of Patty and Mike entering my home without permission or notice." The room went silent. Patty began frantically texting under the table. "If there was an entry, It was for emergency maintenance, Abigail said smoothly. The bylaws clearly state there was no emergency. They searched my personal belongings and accessed my computer. That's a serious accusation, she said, voice hardening. One that could result in legal action if you continue making it without proof. I nodded. I look forward to presenting my proof to the appropriate authorities. The meeting ended shortly after, with Abigail announcing that anyone with frivolous concerns should address them in writing to the board. As I walked to my car, a young man approached, Daniel Evans, who'd moved in last month. Is it true? He asked quietly. About them entering your place? Yes. They did the same to me last week. Said they needed to check the smoke detectors, but I found them going through my file cabinet. Do you have proof? He shook his head. Just caught them in the act. They said it was part of the inspection. Would you be willing to provide a statement about what happened? He hesitated. I can't afford trouble. I just got custody of my kids, and if I lose this place... I understand, I said. But if enough of us stand together, she can't target everyone. Daniel considered this. Let me think about it. That night, I compiled everything I had: financial discrepancies, violation notices that contradicted the actual rules, testimony from neighbors, and the video of my home being illegally entered. I created a secure online folder and shared it with Alex. An hour later, he called back. Owen, this is bigger than I thought. These shell companies? They're connected to other cases we've been investigating. Your HOA president isn't just embezzling from Sycamore Heights, she's involved in a multi-state fraud operation. What does that mean? It means we're opening a formal investigation. But we need to move carefully. Don't tip her off. Too late. The next morning, I woke to pounding on my door. 2 police officers stood outside, Abigail behind them with a satisfied smile. Owen Harding? One officer asked. Yes? We've received a complaint about threatening behavior and harassment toward the HOA board. Mrs. Kramer has requested a restraining order. I looked at Abigail, who was practically vibrating with triumph. Officers, I have documentation of Mrs. Kramer's illegal activities, including breaking into my home yesterday. I'd be happy to show you. He's delusional, Abigail cut in. He's been causing problems since he moved in. Always angry, making threats. We're concerned for our safety. The officers looked uncomfortable. Sir, we're just here to serve the temporary order. You'll need to stay 100 feet away from Mrs. Kramer and the HOA office until the hearing next week. I accepted the paperwork. I understand. Thank you, officers. As they turned to leave, Abigail lingered. You should have just followed the rules, Owen, she said quietly. Now I'll make sure you lose everything, starting with your home. I closed the door and immediately called Alex. She's escalating, I told him. Got a temporary restraining order against me. She's feeling threatened. That's good, means she knows you're onto something. How is this good? I can't even attend HOA meetings now. Trust me, Owen. This will work in our favor. Keep collecting evidence, but do it carefully. And maybe stay with a friend for a few days, just to be safe. I didn't have that luxury. My shifts at the hospital wouldn't allow it. Besides, I refused to be driven from my own home. The next few days were tense. More violation notices appeared, for excessive coming and going, my hospital shifts, unauthorized surveillance equipment, my legally installed doorbell camera, and creating a hostile environment. The fines totaled over $2,000. Then came the certified letter. The HOA was initiating foreclosure proceedings on my unit for failure to pay accumulated fines and assessments. I called my attorney, Rebecca Torres, who specialized in real estate law. They can't foreclose this quickly, she assured me. There's a process. And these fines are clearly retaliatory. Can you file an emergency injunction? Already working on it. But Owen, you need to be prepared. Fighting an HOA is expensive and time-consuming. I don't care, I said. This isn't just about me anymore. That evening, someone knocked on my door. I checked the camera before opening it, Amelia from City Hall, looking nervous. I shouldn't be here, she said, glancing over her shoulder. But I found something you need to see. She handed me a flash drive. Tax records. Abigail has 6 properties in foreclosure across 3 counties, all through different HOAs. Same pattern, excessive fines, quick foreclosures, properties sold to the same investment group. TriStar Investments? Her eyes widened. How did you know? It's one of the shell companies I found in our HOA records. Amelia's hands trembled. There's more. The investment group is owned by her husband, Gregory Kramer. They're buying the foreclosed properties at a fraction of their value using HOA funds, renovating them with contractors who overcharge the HOA, then selling them for massive profits. That's why our fees keep increasing. I realized. They're funding their real estate scheme. Exactly. But I can't be connected to this. I could lose my job. I understand. Thank you, Amelia. After she left, I examined the files. She had handed me the smoking gun, clear evidence of fraud, money laundering, and possibly racketeering. I immediately forwarded everything to Alex and my attorney. Rebecca called within the hour. This changes everything. We need to take this to the district attorney. Not yet, I said. I want to make sure we have an airtight case first. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for Monday. Over the weekend, I gathered statements from 15 neighbors who had experienced similar harassment from Abigail. 3 had video evidence of unauthorized entries into their homes. 2 had lost their properties to suspicious foreclosures. Monday morning arrived, and I dressed carefully in my best suit. As I was leaving, I noticed a white van parked across from my unit, 2 men watching my door. I recognized one as Mike, the maintenance worker who had entered my home. I texted Alex. I think I'm being followed. His response was immediate. Expected. We have eyes on you too. Proceed as planned. At the courthouse, Abigail was already seated with her attorney, a polished man in an expensive suit. She smirked when I entered, clearly expecting an easy victory. Her attorney presented their case first. I was unstable, making unfounded accusations, disrupting the peaceful community. They presented selective screenshots of emails where I had demanded financial transparency, painting them as threatening. When it was my turn, Rebecca started methodically dismantling their narrative. She presented the video of them entering my home, statements from neighbors, and documentation of the selective and excessive enforcement of HOA rules. Then she dropped the bombshell. Your Honor, what we're seeing here is not just HOA overreach. This is a calculated criminal enterprise. Mrs. Kramer has been using her position to engineer foreclosures on properties, which are then purchased by shell companies owned by her husband. Abigail's face went from confident to panicked in seconds. Her attorney jumped up. These are outrageous accusations with no bearing on the restraining order matter. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, peered over her glasses. I disagree. If these allegations are true, they speak directly to Mrs. Kramer's credibility and the real motivation behind this restraining order. We have documentation, Rebecca continued, presenting the files Amelia had provided. Tax records, property transfers, bank statements showing the movement of HOA funds into these shell companies. The judge reviewed the documents, her expression growing increasingly stern. Your Honor, Abigail's attorney tried again. These allegations, even if true, are civil matters to be addressed separately. Actually, said a new voice from the back of the courtroom, they're federal crimes. All heads turned as Alex walked down the aisle, flanked by 2 other agents. He flashed his FBI badge. Special Agent Alex Winters, FBI Financial Crimes Unit. We've been investigating Mrs. Kramer and her associates for the past week based on information provided by Dr. Harding and corroborated through our own investigation. Abigail went pale. This is absurd. I've done nothing wrong. The judge raised her hand for silence. In light of these developments, I'm denying the request for a restraining order against Dr. Harding. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office." She turned to Alex. "I assume you'll want to speak with Mrs. Kramer?" "Yes, Your Honor. We have a warrant for her arrest, as well as for Gregory Kramer and Patricia Miller." As if on cue, the courtroom doors opened again. 2 more agents entered, escorting a handcuffed Gregory Kramer and a sobbing Patty. Abigail stood, eyes wild. "You can't do this! Do you know who we are? We have connections." "Mrs. Kramer," Alex said calmly, "you're under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit racketeering, and a host of other charges we'll detail at the station." As they read her rights, Abigail's eyes locked with mine. "You," she hissed. "Who are you really?" I simply said. "Just a homeowner who believes in playing by the rules, the real ones." The aftermath was a whirlwind. The FBI investigation revealed that Abigail and Gregory had been running their scheme across 5 states, targeting small to mid-sized HOA communities where oversight was minimal. They had amassed over $3.7 million through fraudulent foreclosures and embezzled HOA funds. The investigation also uncovered that several local officials had been bribed to expedite foreclosures and ignore complaints. The scandal stretched far beyond Sycamore Heights. 3 weeks after the arrests, we held an emergency HOA meeting to elect a new board. The atmosphere was completely different, neighbors who had barely spoken now united by their shared experience. "Before we start nominations," I said, addressing the packed community room, "I want to be transparent about my background. Many of you know me as just Dr. Harding from 14B. But before moving here, I served as a military surgeon and later worked with a specialized task force investigating financial crimes within military contracts. That experience helped me recognize and document what was happening here." Murmurs spread through the room. "I'm not looking to run the HOA," I continued. "I believe leadership should be shared among committed residents. But I would like to propose some changes to our bylaws to prevent anything like this from happening again." My proposals were simple: transparent finances with quarterly audits by an independent firm, a requirement that all violation notices include the specific bylaw being violated and photographic evidence, a cap on fines, and a 3-member review panel for any disputed violations. All were unanimously approved. Maria, the elderly widow who had been forced out by Abigail's schemes, was able to return to her home. The FBI had frozen all assets from the fraud, which would eventually be used for restitution to victims. The new HOA board, led by Amelia, who had courageously come forward with her evidence despite risks to her job, immediately reduced monthly fees to appropriate levels and canceled all pending fines issued under Abigail's reign. 6 months later, I received a letter from the federal prosecutor's office. Abigail, Gregory, and Patty had all accepted plea deals. They would serve between 5 and 12 years in federal prison and forfeit all assets gained through their scheme. That evening, I sat on my patio, no longer worried about being fined for having the wrong color cushions on my chairs, and reflected on how one person's greed had affected so many lives. But I also thought about how communities can heal when people stand together against injustice. My phone buzzed with a text from Alex. "Thought you'd want to know. We've identified 6 more HOAs with similar patterns. Your case helped create the blueprint for spotting these schemes." I smiled and typed back, "Just doing what needed to be done." As I put my phone down, Daniel Evans walked by with his kids, waving as they passed. "Meeting tonight to discuss reopening the pool," he called. "You coming?" "Wouldn't miss it," I replied. The HOA still existed, but now it served its true purpose, helping neighbors build a community together, rather than tearing them apart. And every time I parked in my designated spot, or occasionally, when running late from a hospital shift, in a visitor space without fear of being towed, I was reminded that sometimes standing up to a bully doesn't just save yourself, it can save an entire community.